Hi there. My name is Dr. Kimberly Ernest. I'm a licensed psychologist, licensed professional counselor here in the state of Pennsylvania, a mother of two beautiful little boys, and the president of Pennsylvania Counseling Services, as well as the founder of Live Up Counseling.
I'm Hillary Young. I'm a licensed outpatient therapist for PCS at their Lebanon Renaissance office.
My name is Courtney Gates, and I am a family reintegration therapist with Pennsylvania Counseling.
My name is Taylor Meehan. I'm a truancy mentor at Pennsylvania Counseling in the Ephrata Area School District. I work with ages kindergarten through 10th grade.
Hi, I'm Melanie Morgan. I'm the Assistant Clinical Director of Children's Services. I'm a LPC. I'm a clinician, trainer, and parent.
So today we are here to discuss the impact of social media and also sort of how social media improves or detracts from our mental health. And so I guess there is so much content to unpack here. I was already talking to somebody else today, and I was like, listen, this is part one of what will likely be an ongoing conversation, because I think we're also kind of building this plane as we're driving it. We're seeing it across the United States. We're seeing, legal battles over whether or not TikTok is a good idea. We've got folks like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk being called into Congress to say, like, hey, so you're doing all this stuff, but you won't let your own kids on it? Like, what's that about? And so there's a lot of debate and discussion and arguments, and it's extremely polarizing. But as mental health professionals and as those who kind of sort of work day in and day out in this particular population, how do y'all make sense of it? How do you square that circle? And where do we even begin a conversation that runs the gamut in terms of all the different bits and pieces?
Well, I think as a parent and a clinician, it's a challenge. It truly is a challenge because there are benefits, right? The connection with maybe more distant relatives, the connection with during COVID, it offered an opportunity for continued conversation, but how that has developed now into, I was reading something earlier today, and it said that the average amount of time that an adolescent is on social media is 7 hours a day. It's almost like a full-time job that they're spending almost 40 to 50 hours a week on social media alone. And so when we talk about, technology-based addictions, we talk about immediate gratification, we talk about the inverse to immediate gratification, which would be, the impact on their overall self-image and their overall well-being. We're talking about a lot of different pieces when we talk about social media use. And I'm not just talking about children, adolescents, even into adulthood.
So I think that we will probably shit on social media a fair bit here today. I'm just getting the vibe in our pre-pod chat and the email leading up to this. And truly, the data is horrible. Like, it's bleak. Like, social media, we're going to be hard-pressed to find some benefits. But I want to start there, right? Because I am a strengths-focused clinician. I think we start with what's good about it.
Yes.
And so if I were to very intentionally have us begin there, realizing that I know exactly where this conversation is going, what are the upsides of social media? Why are y'all on social media?
So
No?
I would consider myself a social media gremlin. And
Gremlin.
I hate to say that, but I'm on there.
Yeah?
And I feel like I see a lot of my students use it to regulate, which is up and down.
Sure.
Because I'm concerned if they don't have other ways to regulate. But at the same time, I would rather you take a few minutes on your phone than have a panic attack while you're in class. So it's interesting to me, but I love the scroll. I wish I didn't.
Yeah?
But it's fun. There's a lot of things that if you have a particular interest, you can really engage with that easily on social media versus trying to find people in the world who share your same very specific interest can be tough.
Yeah, my special interest is chickens. So, yeah, get that. And I'm in all the chicken groups. All of them.
Yeah. I mean, I'm on social media. What I enjoy the most about social media is like just the hilarious videos.
Yeah.
It does offer a way to just kind of disconnect from the reality of the day to day and just, the things that the creativity that people have in creating videos. But I have noticed something as I've been watching more videos is that a lot of them are becoming more scripted. And so I really love the genuine, like, oh man, I really screwed that up. Or like, hey, look at this like random thing that I caught in this video. I'm going to now make it a short. And I really, I miss though, like the authenticity. But I can go through and I can fall into the and now you don't have to be on TikTok. Now they have it on Facebook. And so I think that that's a benefit is being able to temporarily disconnect from like your day to day and your daily struggles.
No, and I think Taylor, you make a great point. Like, it is a form of self-regulation, and obviously we're staying strength focused, but you run the risk of becoming over dependent on it. It can become the risk of like it becoming the only tool in your toolbox, and there's some definite downsides to that. But I imagine in a school setting, or I mean, I work with over the course of my career some really high risk populations, really high risk adolescents, really high risk adults with some pretty challenging behaviors, really severe substance use disorders. And so when I think about that in terms of self regulation, like I've worked with people that use opiates to like they put a needle in their arm to regulate, and like pound for pound, just scroll. If that's the alternative, I would much rather, or like in a school-based setting, if the alternative is like flipping a table and walking out, probably scrolling for a few minutes is a way better option. And I worry that it becomes so almost dependent on it for regulation, and it's a tuning out form of self-care versus a tuning in form of self-care. And I think pound for pound, tuning in will always be more effective if you can tolerate it. But there's always going to be that low-hanging fruit of like the numb out, tune out self-care that works way better than the tuning in if we were being transparent with one another.
And Mel, I think you touched on this earlier, but like keeping in contact with family that's like far away.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that's one of the main reasons I got on social media so young, was because a lot of my family was away, like Texas, not very easy to just get in a car and, drive that like 18 whatever hours.
Are you from Texas?
No.
Oh.
No. We just have family that moved there, which is weird because like why Texas out of everywhere? But weird, off topic.
No state.
Better than PA, I guess. So, but no, like it's just easier. I mean, you don't always pick up the phone or like call and say like, hey, like what's going on? But to see like things posted on social media, it's easier. So
It's a way to like passively keep up.
yeah, like hey, I want to know what you're doing, but I don't necessarily want to reach out.
Yeah.
So
Kim, you mentioned this earlier too, but while I don't have social media, I do have Pinterest. I don't know if that counts. So I will sometimes search things on my Pinterest. So you said about information, and I think like that's probably where I use that, whether it's looking up certain things, even like job related, like working with kids, or like a way to like do this fun game with kids. Tends to be more my kiddos. That's about all I got though, and that's digging deep in my soul for something good. So
No, when I mean, like we launched the Live Up counseling program recently. It would not be what it is today without social media. Because I'm reconnecting with a lot of people that once upon a time worked at PCS, left because they needed to make more money. They wanted to move into a lower acuity population, whatever, all the reasons why people leave community mental health. And I realize there's many. But I've kept in touch with a lot of these people. And now I'm able to reach out and be like, hey, I have an option for you. Like, I know you left for the, and like a lot of success in those individuals coming back and kind of rejoining a mission that's just extremely close to my heart. And so that there's that passive keep up. It's that keeping in contact with people that otherwise, like, I don't know that I would have picked up the phone and called them or even shot them a text message within reason. But I'll like DM you and be like, hey, you know, you happy where you are? I got this thing. And it's been pretty successful. And just getting information out there. I do like, I'm going to go to a plant sale this weekend because of social media at Milton Hershey. So like all the little things that kind of let you get out and about. I started tending chickens about 4 years ago. Early on, like, you don't know what all can go wrong with chickens, y'all. Like, a lot of shit can go south with chickens. Like, what's wrong with this chicken? And so many of those groups are like a little heartbreaking because it's like a dead chicken. It's like, what happened? It's like, I don't know, man. But also like a lot of really good information on how to proceed, what to do. A lot of really bad information there too. So I also am in like some mental health groups, and there are times where I was like, no, don't do that. Mommy groups. Terrible advice. No, don't give your 6-year-old kid diagnosed with ADHD medical marijuana. Please don't. Please don't do that. So there's a lot of bad advice as well. But it is, we're staying strength focused for just another moment, and then I promise I'll let us loose. It is one way to obtain information, whether it be good or bad, I guess. I'll leave it there.
Even safety related, like while this can also go south with rumors and whatnot, I'm thinking about an incident in Lebanon a couple weeks ago, and there were able to spread quickly, like, hey, stay away from this area of town, there's something going down. So I think about that for like college campuses or things that can quicker spread, hey, like, don't go out or be careful in this area.
Yeah.
But the inverse of that is if you are not social media or trying to be less social media dependent, a lot of systems now rely on social media to convey information. Like when my kids were still at Derry Township, that's how they told you if like schools were closing or this or that. It was all a social media blast before some of the other things fell into line. That's challenging.
Right.
Yeah, there are certain like coffee shops even, which isn't so serious if the I mean, it is serious if the coffee shop I'm trying to go to is closed. But yeah, but like there are certain ones I know I just have to check Instagram because that's the only place it's going to be updated.
Yeah.
But then you get on there and you run the risk of getting distracted and falling down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't always watch the news anymore either. Like I remember schools
don't.
would close and like they would flash it on the bottom of the TV.
Right.
But then like you had to wait for, I don't even think it's called Twitter anymore. I think it's like X or something. But like they would post on Twitter and that's how you'd find out if your school was closed.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, we don't have to stay strength focused anymore. Y'all go ham. Ooh, so where do we go now? Now that sorry, did I miss anything? Any other benefits that we can identify?
I think we covered them.
Okay.
We covered
Yeah.
So as a psychologist and much of my work, my research, you know, I love doing couples and family work. I love relationships. I love. I just think that relationships are kind of the key to our happiness or our suffering in a lot of different places. And so I want to hover, like, how do we envision social media in impacting some of our most important relationships?
I want to bring up something that I was thinking about coming into this too. That's always like I'm now off of social media for probably, I did the math last night, maybe about 12 years with Facebook or Snapchat were my two big ones. And I was always like interested when people would post like happy birthday or like, you know, Mother's Day's coming up. And it was always like, you know, my mom is like the best person, or like my husband, like he's the greatest. And I would always like sit back and go, this is so sweet. Like, I'm glad you feel this way. But as a therapist, my mind always goes to like, are you then turning and telling him or them this to their face, looking in their eyes, saying it out loud? And I think that's when I see those kind of things that I go like, yes, it's sweet and we get to share how we feel with people, but like, are we missing that like direct human to human communication, even if it's someone who's on the couch next to you?
I think the research says we are.
Yeah.
I think there definitely is that piece. And I know when I do couples counseling, one of my big rules is we don't text each other our feelings anymore. We don't. We're done with that. Because do you know how bad some of these text argument? Well, I mean, I'm a couples counselor, so like, whew, it gets dark fast, and there's no context, there's no nuance, there's no tone, and so I can say like, I just feel like you don't see me, or I can say is, I feel like you don't see me. And those are two different messages. Those are conveying two very different things. They have different remedies and outcomes. And so I think, I think the data really suggests that people aren't doing that near as much as they are. Or as you had mentioned, or maybe it was you, like a way to passively keep up with people when you wouldn't pick up the phone and call. But should we be picking up the phone and calling? Like, is that more valuable in terms of connection? And does this instead serve this less than ideal stand-in that almost gives us an excuse to not do the uncomfortable, but maybe more beneficial or more necessary thing?
Yeah. And I think to touch on, Hillary, what you were saying, a lot of people, like, they just would rather text or, like, Snapchat, like, what's going on. And then a lot of things get misinterpreted. And then the other person that's, like, struggling starts going down because they might try to communicate. And, I mean, I see it all the time. I mean, heck, I've even been through it myself. Like, sometimes people feel more comfortable through that space, like through the social media, but it's damaging. Like, it's not doing anything beneficial.
Right. It's like that authentic versus inauthentic relationships. And like the research and a lot of the things that I've been reading and reviewing is that our teens especially are just experiencing these really inauthentic relationships that are easy to navigate into and easy to navigate out of. And so they are experiencing, like, on Snapchat, there's a thing called streaks, right? And I was watching a
I don't
TED
know
Teen.
anything about Snapchat because I believe Snapchat is for sex offenders. I just exclusively.
Yeah, I heard this on a TED Teen, I think it's called. And this girl was explaining how she went on a trip over the summer and she was in a foreign country, so her phone didn't work. And she couldn't wait to get home to tell her friends about, like, all the great experiences that she had. And her friends have just moved forward without her, which, you know, part of a relationship is the re-engagement, but it was around her snaps and that she broke their 100-day streak and that there were other kids that would be able to start and maintain the snap streak compares to this teen. And she's like, when I went back and I looked at, like, things that we would actually, like, snap to each other, she's like, it's not even what Snapchat was created for, which was, like, quick pictures of, like, hey, like, look what I'm eating, look where I'm standing, look at these things that I'm doing. It was a blank screen that said streak. And then they would send that. And then a couple hours later, the other person would send a blank screen that said streak back to them. And then, like, they would check that box. And that in the moment felt authentic. Like, they had an authentic relationship, a connection. And then she quickly realized when she went back to school and was so distant from her peers that that was a very inauthentic relationship.
And I think a lot of individuals, like, especially with my generation, the Snapchat streak, for whatever reason, like, it is so important. And, like, you can just send a picture of, like, the ceiling or the floor. And it's like, oh, okay, like, that's done. Like, talk to this person today. But it's no, like, hey, how are you? Like, genuinely concerned. Like, are you doing okay? Like, let's go grab something to eat. No one wants to go out and do that. They'd just rather hide behind the screen and have the interactions that way.
No, and it's like, I have these 10 friends. I talk to them every day.
Right.
But you're not talking to them.
Like, do
You're
you
just
actually talk to
sending
them?
them a random screen that says streak on it. Like, just to keep the, like, make the number go up of how many days in a row you've chatted with this person.
Right.
Which I'm not sure, like, what that's actually giving to anybody.
Yeah.
But it's hurting. Like, my alarm is going off for, like, social anxiety. Like,
Yeah.
you're never having to do the thing that's uncomfortable. I mean, I have it too. I'm nervous to be sitting here doing this. But, like, if you never do stuff like that, like,
Right.
it's getting worse and worse and worse. And you're not even sending a picture of your face. It's the ceiling. Like, holy smokes. Yeah.
Well, it does feel like that would eventually have some pretty negative consequence, like over time, like to be cut off of your friend group.
Right.
because you didn't send God, every time I talk about Snapchat, I just hate it more and more and more. And this conversation is no different. But I mean, also as you're talking, because like I'm way older than that. Like that's I don't even TikTok. I'm too old for it. Like it wasn't around. When I was a kid. So it's different. Like there's some challenges there, but even then, like I look at some of my most authentic relationships, like some of my closest real life friendships, but we don't talk to each other like day in and day out. We send each other reels. And like that's our communication. And it's like, oh my God, like look at this cat. He's so fucking tired. That's adorable. But there's not like I was just the other day, one of my good friends just had her first baby, and like it's hard to have a new baby and whatnot. And so I realized that I sent her like all these reels about like how tired you are and like all these funny motherhood things and yada yada, but I haven't said how you doing. Haven't said how you doing. Just am like, oh yes, sleep sucks. But there's not that real, genuine, like authentic piece. And so how do we not get sucked into or lured into that false sense of connection? Because then even in like preparing for this, I was like, man, I'd like to see, but like, we haven't hung out in like 4 months. Do I text her and be like, let's have breakfast? Yeah, and I can, and I will, especially now that I put myself on the carpet here today. But yeah, like how do we avoid it? Because sometimes that becomes all our relationships are, and we don't notice it until it almost feels like we're too far down that rabbit hole.
It's like really easy to feel like you're supporting someone that way and feel like you're connecting, especially if someone that's like it's not convenient to see them, that you wouldn't just, it's not built in to see them. Like my family and I will send recipes back and forth, but we're not getting together and making those recipes. That's like the idea, like, oh, at some point we should make this, but there's like in our chats back and forth 100 reels of like, look at this food that we're not going to make together. And it's like, okay, what are we doing here? Are we just appreciating that this is good? Because that's fine.
Yeah.
But then like I'm trying to like be more aware of like, okay, but am I also interacting with people in real life, and am I also getting what I want out of my different relationships?
Yeah, I think there's something to think about when you have somebody who's at a distance. And as I was again like preparing for today, I was thinking about so then I got curious, like what would be the difference if we video chatted somebody, and like we used
God, my
even
heart
know,
rate
like-
went up even you saying that. I'm like,
like FaceTime, right? And there's more of a connection there. And like, so can we provide this information to the people that we love and the people that we care about and we want to connect with, instead of just doing the like, hey, chatting back and forth. Like I'm guilty of that too. Or like, oh, look, they liked my picture of my kid. Do you want to FaceTime my kid? You may live several hours away, but there's a step there that I think if we can support in stepping back away from that, like that wall that we can create, the facade, especially like when we're struggling so much and we're like, oh, we only want people to see this, we don't want people to see that, then words are a lot easier than looking face to face with somebody.
but like not right now, and not about Pokemon. And I just want to be quiet for a minute, and it's really hard. And so I think that also like social media or like sending the reels, that's a way that I can stay connected and sort of say like, I care about you, but I don't want to see you. And it's not you, it really is me. But I also know that if I get past that part of myself and schedule the time and actually show up and have those moments of connection, I always leave happy and feeling fulfilled and connected and better for it. It's like just that initial, like, let's do it. Let's do the thing.
Yeah.
You just sparked something that when you said Pokemon. You guys remember the Pokemon Go era?
It's still
Oh, we're still in it.
Oh, I fully agree. But like when it first started, I feel like people were out and talking to each other, but it was so cool because it started on the phone and then it grew beyond that. And I feel
Yeah.
like other than like what we were saying about events planning, where it's like, there's this plant sale this weekend and now I'm going to go to it because I know it exists because of Instagram. Like, I haven't seen that many things where it started fully on a screen and then became a thing people do in the real world. And like, I wish we could see more of that. Like, I feel like there's such potential for what social media could be and like what it could be used for. But I wish everything was Pokemon Go. That's like the main point of what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah. And I think we live in a society now where we're scared to let our kids go outside and wander around on their own and walk away from us unsupervised at, even 10, 11, 12 years old. There's a fear of like what will happen, what could happen. And so it's like, well, they're here and look, they have, I don't know, 100 followers or friends on Facebook. They have 100 followers on their YouTube channel. And we're like, okay, well, they're social. So they're in group chats. And then you're like, wait, like, who are you chatting with? And so I think it creates a false sense of security where it's like, I can see them, so I know what's going on and I can see that they're doing well and nobody's gonna like take them and run off with them. They're not gonna have any traumas because they're right here with me. And really, as they're on that phone or they're on that tablet or that device, it's happening. And a lot of times parents aren't aware of it.
No, my husband's favorite quote of the moment is giving your child a phone. I'm going to butcher it, but giving your child a phone isn't handing your child the world, it's handing your child to the world.
Yeah.
And so often we have that false sense. That was actually one of the questions submitted for the pod today. So since we're there, we'll go there. Someone said, I've heard that sextortion, or essentially sex trafficking, is becoming more common than previously realized. What can parents do to protect our kids? And I think it came down to one of the things that showed up when I was preparing for today is the American Academy of Pediatrics has some really specific recommendations surrounding some of this stuff. And one of the big ones is monitor their content, monitor what your kids are looking at, monitor the group chats, monitor the website. Because there's what Discord.
Yeah.
And it's in like when you were talking about like, I wish we would start online and then have that go. And it's in like, so I love chickens. Obviously. And through my chicken groups online, I've made some real life chicken friends that I go and meet up with that I wouldn't. I was just at one's house this weekend or back on, I think it was Monday or Tuesday night. And it's at like 7:30 at night. I put my kids to bed. I tell my husband that I'm going to go visit my chicken friend for a minute. He's like, wait, who is that? And it's this 70-year-old lady I met on the internet. And we love chicken. We met in the pandemic. We used to sit out on our porches and talk about chickens. I think she probably doesn't have a lot of local family, so the pandemic was, probably tough on her. I know it was. And so, but that's me meeting a stranger on the internet and going to their house at like 7:30 at night. And my husband's like at 9:30, like, are you okay? Like, it was like, no, don't worry. I'm just meeting with my chicken friend I met on the internet. And so what if my kid did that? Like, I can do that because I'm an adult and I've had enough interactions with this woman that I feel very safe in her presence. And, but even then, there was a moment of like, well, what if this is the time? Like, what if this is the moment that the weird thing happens? But I would never want my kids to do it. And if my children were like, hey, Mom, I'm going to go meet this guy I met on Pokemon Go, be like, fuck you are. Friend, no. So how do we protect our kids? And I think the only way to do it is to monitor their content.
Yeah.
And Mel, I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier with like going out places. Like we, as a society, like, are scared. I mean, me being in my early 20s, like, I don't go anywhere by myself. Like, I am an introvert. I would stay at home. But I know, like, if I do have to go out, you know, I'll call someone or make sure that someone goes with me. But at the end of the day, like, you also see a lot of things on social media of, like, hey, at this place, like, this happened. So it gives you, like, a whole new perspective of, well, this is reality. Like, this is the real world. So, like, for adults to go out and meet, like, random people, like, yeah, we tell our kids and, like, friends, like, oh, yeah, like, you shouldn't do that. But, like, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place because it's like, do you take the chance and, like, have a great relationship with someone down the road? Or, and I think with my generation, like, that's a lot of, like, what dating's like, because you don't know, because human trafficking is just such a big thing now.
Yeah, and I was, gosh, I really wish I could remember the agency that I just did just an hour-long training. I watched an hour-long training with, and like, wow. I like walked out of my office and I was like, I'm going home and shutting off my electricity and collecting all of our devices and I'm going to smash them to pieces. But the way that like technology has advanced and you can like now create like a 3D person who looks like a real person, or they use a face, and they're using this to, like boys especially, they're creating young girls, and they're using voice changing software so they sound like a young girl, and they're luring in these young men, and then they're getting them to send pictures, and then they're using those pictures as blackmail. So if you don't send me money, if you don't do this, you don't do that, I'm going to send this to your parents, to your teachers, to your friends, and it's just terrifying how, and I can see all the benefits of, you know, a 3D person. I was just talking about my headshot earlier, getting my headshot done, and I was like, I would love for it to be a 3D person instead of me, because it takes me a long time to do like makeup and straighten my hair. So I can see benefits in it when it's used in the right way, but there is that risk, and there is predators out there on the internet. And so I think kind of along with monitoring your kids' social media, monitoring their technology use, it's about having the conversations too. And listen, that is like super, right? It's super freaking uncomfortable. And it's so important to just sit in that discomfort with your child and say, like, listen, this is not going to be comfortable for me either, but there are people out there who will ask you for inappropriate pictures of yourself, and name it, right? Name it with your kid, right? They're going to ask you for pictures of you naked. There is never a time that you should be taking a picture of yourself naked and sending a picture of yourself naked. You never know who's on the other end of that phone or on the other end of that chat. And you never know who can get into your phone and just take all of your pictures and use them in ways that you never imagined or intended for them to be used.
And there's enough people out there that are going to do some weird stuff that to know for certain is helpful. Like I just sent it on to our IT team. I got an email, like to my professional email, that said, hey, you've been hacked. I have the images of what your face looks like when you look at porn. I'm going to send it to all of your professional contacts if you don't send me this amount of money. And because I don't happen to look at porn, I know you don't have any images of what my face looks like when I look at porn, because that doesn't exist. So like I know that what you're telling me isn't true. But if I had the brain of a 13-year-old child, or if you know you don't know what's out there, then these other, it's just phishing. They're just trying to see, like, can I get you? Can I get you? And I'm one of a million people who got that email, but I suspect there's people that fell for it.
Yeah.
I would suspect that there are people out there that are like, oh shit, they know my secret, and they send the money or do whatever the thing is.
Right.
and you had mentioned like the AI stuff. And I think we are on, just like we rolled out social media with no understanding of where we were going. We just ran through that door as a culture and as a society with zero forethought into what that was going to mean, big picture. I think we are on the cusp of a similar situation in the AI revolution. And I mean, I have clients in our problematic sexual behavior group that will take images of women they know and use AI to create pornographic images of those same individuals. And they're not real, but they look real. And I think that, I don't know, there's a lot of ethical pieces. Like, I don't think AI is going to like go the way of the Terminator. I'm not there yet. I don't think we're at any real risk of it getting so smart that it's going to harm us yet. I mean, maybe some, but I mean, watch a Roomba. It can't.
You can't do anything.
We're good from the robots for a minute. But when it comes to how people can use AI, I'm afraid, and how nefarious people or individuals that do not have your best interests at heart. I see like cyberbullying is one of the things that I have a lot of concerns about when it comes to the child and adolescent mental health crisis. And I see AI as a beautiful way to really fuck with people through a cyberbullying platform. And we're not playing that tape the whole way through, and I think there's a lot of risks out there.
Yeah, yeah. When you were talking about the email, it was like they like sent that to the complete wrong person. But I think about how
Bet you don't. Bet you don't.
right.
But cool.
And I think about how much like education and knowledge you have, and to be able to like look at that email and be like, no, and like actually not. But like, right, like anybody, right? An adult, an adolescent. Like my kid is in middle school and he has his own email address through the school, right? And so like all it takes is that to be sent to a school email address. And I am sure as a child, there will be a sense of panic. And then what do I do with this next? Even though he's never viewed pornography. He may not even really know what it is, right? But it's that sense of panic that there's like a consequence, right? If you don't do this, there is a consequence. And he may not know what that connection is yet, but he knows that there's a consequence, and he might feel like he needs to follow through with something that, you know, hopefully will be coming to his parent. But I mean, in reality, our kids may turn to each other. They may turn to social media, right? And like, what do I do if I get this email? So there's a lot of like, it's like kind of all interwoven. And I think as parents, there's having real frank conversations with your kid and setting that relationship with them that, hey, you can come to me with anything. And even, you know, like mom's human, I might have a reaction or response initially. And know that will quickly fade, and I will be here as your parent, and we'll figure this out together.
Well, and my concern with that too is, I mean, I also work with a lot of high risk kids because if you're a truant, you're probably also into other stuff. And a lot of them don't have a lot of parental support. And that's sort of where some of this has started for them. So if somebody like that doesn't have anybody to turn to and they're 15, they're not going to know. Sometimes social media is the only support or connection a kid is getting. And I'm not sure where to, like, I don't want to take away their only support. So in that case, I wouldn't be an advocate for like no social media forever. Obviously, that's not a reality that would happen. But I'm just not sure, like, having kids who do have a lot of parental support then hopefully will be able to go to their parents and learn right from wrong and how to navigate something no one's ever navigated before. But like, what if you don't have that support then? You're just looking further into social media for your answers.
Yeah. I think that's why it's so hard to like, you cannot draw that line in the sand.
Absolutely.
You have to be aware that like that line like doesn't exist because there's so many external factors.
No, I think that was one of the other recommendations from the American Academy of Pediatrics is like instead of asking kids, how many hours of media they're using, or adults. I mean, this is obviously geared towards kids, but I think adults should be asking themselves the same question. It says ask what they're crowding out with it. So less about what are you doing, or like just reduce it, but more about what is the cost essentially of your use, and what are you missing out on because of those things, and is there a way to really intentionally grow those other things, and then maybe perhaps a byproduct is the social media will go down, instead of, hey, let's just take away this thing, this coping skill, this point of connection. How do you grow the other things in hopes that maybe it could unintentionally go down, versus like no social media? And so I thought that that was a really nice reframe. And one of the things they talk about is like in teaching your kids digital literacy, supporting them in understanding about like the hooks social media uses to keep you online longer so that you see more ads, so they make more ad revenue, or all of those different things. And so if your concern is your kids are on social media so much so they're never outside, increase your outside time. Don't decrease your social media use.
And I feel like the key with that too is there's been, at least I've noticed, and I've done a lot of reading about it, like there's been a significant reduction in like third spaces and places you can play outside.
Yeah.
Places you can be without spending money. I like my middle schoolers, they don't have money unless they babysit or their parents give them an allowance. Like they're too young to have jobs, but they can't go anywhere for free. So they're kind of stuck between be at home and be isolated. Some kids have friends that are able to come over, and like parents are happy to have friends over, but not everybody has that situation. So your other option is to be on your phone. And like I have kids who say, oh yeah, I'd love to go do this, I'd love to go do that, but they don't have, for whatever reason, the opportunity, but they do have a phone in their pocket.
And I think going along with that, like you then compare yourself to other kids that can go out and do these things. And then it makes the self-esteem lower, and like, why can't I do that? So it actually is even more damaging because you're having that comparison because you're just left being on social media.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gives you a window to see all the fun everyone's having without you.
Yeah.
And when you're 13, that is probably the worst.
Like the biggest thing in the world. Yeah.
I was talking to a client just this week who lives in a tough community, right? Just there's not a lot of community safety. And that was one of the things he was talking about. He's like, I want my kids to be like play less video games and get outside more, but it's not safe for them to be outside here. Like the gun violence in my community is extreme. The gang involvement in my community is high. If I tell my kids to go outside, I'm not so sure about what the next options are. And so like, yeah, no, I don't love that my 6-year-old plays Fortnite all the time. But I do believe it's better than him playing outside in Hall Manor, Harrisburg. And it's like, yeah, I don't know that you're necessarily wrong. But as you see, like, it's interesting, like as online commerce has increased, like when I was a child, I hung out at the mall all the time because the mall is free and you can get a pretzel for $1 and you can see your friend, like mall rats. Like, come on, I can't be the only one who like loved that movie as a kid. But like there just aren't spaces like that anymore. Like where do adolescents go right now?
Well, and I mean, I'm thinking like kind of the flip of that too is like then for adults too. Like where can you hang out as an adult? A bar, which, is can be problematic all in itself, right? And so like where do adults go to meet other adults? And I think that that's a challenge. And you were saying earlier about the like online dating, right? And the ability to move in and out of a relationship so quickly and to have like multiple relationships all at one time, but then with that multiple relationships at one time, or the ability to move in and out, is the continued pattern of rejection, right? Acceptance, rejection, without really being able to sit in the space of like building through the challenges of a relationship. It's not and like relationships are not easy in any kind of way with anybody. And but the ability to move in and out of a relationship so quickly just keeps that cycle going.
Because especially like through social media, it's easier to what they call ghost, like just all of a sudden like stop talking to that person.
Yeah.
Then you're just kind of like, hey, what happened? Like, was it me? Like, why didn't you talk to me? So that goes back to a lot of people hide behind the social media. And when things get too real, they're done.
Yeah.
And then you see it bleed into, like, we're seeing it bleed into, like, the professional world now. Like, I've been ghosted by master's level staff that we think are going to start. And we have people behind the scenes, like,
or even clients
working to set up schedules for them. We have clients already in that schedule.
Right.
And then they don't show up to orientation on day one. It's like, you are an adult. And like
Yes.
literally text me, email me, just say like, I'm not interested. But I was no show just this morning. A guy with a master's degree that I scheduled with yesterday.
Yeah.
And it's like, really, bruh? Like, you can't.
Or like you set up a time with a client, or like even I've seen it from the parents actually, like moving away from the kids, like the parents will no show you.
Yeah.
And like it's weird because you'll send them a text or even call them and like confirm. And then that day comes and it's just like, oh, where'd you go? Like,
But then I also see that shit very much reinforced on social media. Like somehow
Right.
in my reels, I get this one guy that's like, Gen Alpha, Gen Z, this is, you don't know anybody, a 2-week notice.
Right,
Like,
right.
that's just the employer trying to keep you down. And I was like, first of all, your COO is not covering for you when you don't give a 2-week notice.
Yeah.
It's like Brenda, who doesn't have another option, that's now going to overfunction. Like, but it's just courteous. Like, it's not like the man trying to keep you down. It's like,
like it was a
I'm not coming. I'm
Time to
sorry.
sort things out.
right.
Like,
Yeah.
and I see where that comes from. Like, I see where that mentality of like, if your employer isn't taking care of you, like that's not your responsibility to worry. But like you said, then it's on that other person at the same level as you.
Yeah, it's
That,
never
like,
your
they're-
employer that suffers.
Right.
Right.
It's
It's
the other
gonna be your
people.
coworkers.
Yeah.
And
Right.
like unfortunately it's gonna come down on other people who don't deserve it.
And in our business, I mean, it's
Also clients.
it's clients that suffer, and that's where I get real salty. Is
Right.
like I'll cover, like I'll overfunction. I've got people like Mel in my corner. I know she'll show up. Like we'll figure it out.
Right.
Yeah.
So
you have
we'll be
people
all
in-
right.
in
But you're hurting
crisis
your clients in
potentially,
these
like-
moments,
Right.
and I'm seeing more and more of that in our field. I resign effective immediately as a direct care provider, and I realize endings are hard. I know it's hard to say goodbye, and so I know that's usually the rationale, right? Like I don't want to have to meet with all these clients. I don't want to say all the you've seen it in your clinic, I'm sure. I don't want to say all the hard goodbyes. I don't want to have those closure sessions because goodbyes evoke something in me. But at the end of the day, I have no fucking clue how to teach somebody resiliency without them also experiencing at least some sense of suffering or some sense of discomfort.
Right.
And so if you can't have those moments in which you have those uncomfortable goodbyes in a professional setting, how are you going to get through the rest of your life? Like how can you ever function as an adult if you so bubble wrap yourself from the world that you never have those lower level points of discomfort? And I think that's where social media is really like that's where we're going from the virtual into the real world in a way that I think is really high risk.
Yeah. And Deb Thomas actually did a training a couple weeks ago of like being uncomfortable or being comfortable in the uncomfortable. And I think that is so true. Like even putting the phone down and going out into a social situation instead of like just texting or, like learn to be comfortable with that. But I mean, that's not the reality for a lot of people.
I will go as far as to say, like, as a therapist, that I truly believe, like, that's what's healing in and of itself is
Right.
doing the uncomfortable. And to speak on the point I was saying earlier, like, I think with social media, we have the ability to, like, manage how we look. And I forget what the one article called it, like, not impression management, but something like that.
Positive presentation.
Yes, positive presentation management. And I think they were trying to say that that helps your self-esteem because you can kind of fix how you look online. And as I was reading it, I was like underlining it, like, no. And, like, to me, it's like, that's so the opposite. Like the beauty is like in healing is being able to be vulnerable. Like even a couple minutes ago saying like, I felt nervous here. I was like, ooh, that felt good then afterwards. Like that, you have to like do that thing. And like
Right.
I don't know, you're taking away that if you get to not really have to show like the not great parts of yourself. And I think that's the part for me that always turned me off of social media was like, ooh, ooh, like, why do I feel bad that like everyone else is perfect, but I know they're not? So it's just,
Right.
I think it just takes away that natural like healing in a relationship when you can show your true vulnerable self.
Yeah. And then that heals back to the like comparison to everyone, because then like you're stuck in the, oh, I don't want to go experience something new, but then I'm jealous or like, you know, feeling isolated because I'm not going out and trying said things. So I think it all just pairs back to, I mean, with the social media, like self-esteem, confidence, like all of it, it just affects the mental health so much.
I feel like that awareness can't be good. Like I'm trying to explain what I mean. Like, I think when you're having, like, we're having a face-to-face interaction, it's a little weird because we're being recorded and we're like on microphones right now. But all of that aside, like, we're sitting here interacting with each other. I'm not thinking about like what my face looks like. I'm thinking about what you're saying while you're talking to me. But if I'm on social media constantly, I'm thinking about how am I being presented as opposed to just what am I doing? Like, you're not living, you're just presenting. And I can't imagine that being so aware of that all the time, especially as a younger person. Like, when you don't have the confidence to begin with, I don't know how you can possibly build it if you're constantly like aware of every little thing.
There was something in the research about that. It was like when you become the object or something, like when you hear yourself in a voicemail, you're like, oh God.
Yeah.
Like enough of that through social media, like that's doing that same effect. Like we're not focusing on other things. We're so like only on ourselves and what we look like and what we're presenting to people.
Yeah. I forget in what capacity, maybe in a training or something, I had mentioned this like a few weeks ago where I was like, man, I can like really fall into like mom shaming the hell out of myself. Like I'll like, you know, just have a day. I think we all are allowed to have our days, and at the end of that day, I'll go through like the shit pit of like, look at all these amazing things that these moms are doing with their kids, and then I'm like, and I fed my kids takeout for the third day in a row, and like I miss that like. I watched a movie with them. I missed that I still gave them a hug and kiss goodnight. I missed that like I called on my greater network around me to say like, hey, can you do something with my kids this weekend? Because like I just don't have it. You know, I miss all of those things because I'm looking at like, look at this mom and these amazing things that, you know, she's doing with her kids, and I should just be able to do that too. But it's because we're getting it in clips, and I think it becomes really like tying back to what I was saying earlier about like the reels, right? It was like the genuine like mass mess ups that people had, or like their true like just during COVID where people were like describing their experiences or describing ways that they were like entertaining themselves. Those were hilarious and great and informative and emotion evoking. And now I'm like starting to watch these videos and I'm like, there's no way that dad is at Home Depot trying to put those 3 kids on that cart. Do you know what video I'm talking about? And like this guy's just sitting here watching them, like you don't even see the kids in the things, and like he's leaving that baby like in the middle of the road, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is so fake, and I can put it together, but I've already watched 99% of that video.
But can you blame them?
Right.
I don't know. Like, it used to be that people were assholes while driving, right? Like, being in your car gave you a certain level of anonymity. And, like, there's a lot of research about that, like, people will, like, scream out of their car, but never would have, like, walking down the street, right? But now, like, the comment section on a certain video, and like I remember like Brene Brown talking about it, and it's interesting since we've started like the How to Be Happy Hour. We're coming up on a year of doing this, and now that we have the reels, we get a lot more comments because people will watch the shorts a lot more frequently, and some of these people are dicks. Like they're just saying stuff like Brene Brown very specifically. I remember her talking about less feelings, more Botox, like. That's the kind of feedback that she's getting. Or I remember like on one of our reels, they'd commented on one of my guests and been like, definitely have more attractive guests if you want more. And I was like, delete that, get that off the internet. Like, how the fuck do we get rid of that?
Right.
And like personal, like I've been pretty personally attacked and criticized. And so, like, I understand that. I mean, even y'all heard me before we came in. I was like, can we move my camera back over here? This is not my best side. I don't like where the camera is. Like, because people are dicks on the internet. And, like, presumably these are adults on the internet. And
Right.
so then I think about, like, turning the clock down to, like, to adolescence and the huge amounts of like cyberbullying and cruelty we're seeing there, and then to have kids in it. Like, I grew up, I was a weird kid in high school, you know. We probably extrapolate that from our experiences with me as an adult, but like, I was a weirdo. I was bullied a lot. It was nice to go home and get the fuck away from it. And now you can't. You get bullied in school, and then you go home and they bully you there, and you get so bullied that you go in cyber school, but they still find you and they still text you, or they still send you messages. And like, there's no, like, of course our kids are in crisis because it is unrelenting. And then couple the bullying with that level of anonymity or disengagement, or like, you don't even have to look at my face when you hurt me. You can just say the hurtful thing and like, that feels good, and be a little troll. Like, you don't have to feel it. Like, of course it's getting more and more dangerous.
I threw this question out to the other mentors yesterday on our staff meeting. Like, just there's like 5 or 6 of us in that meeting, and I was just like, hey, I'm going on this podcast tomorrow. Like, does anybody have any thoughts about how social media is affecting the mental health, like, of your students currently? And one of the other mentors was telling me, she works in a middle school, and they have an Instagram account where they literally sneak pictures of each other, and they try to get like a bad angle, like a bad picture, and I'm doing air quotes, and then they comment and just like rag on each other.
Like, tear the person up.
And it's horrible. And like, that's the whole purpose of that account. And like, I wouldn't be surprised if there's something like that going on at my school. We have tons of issues with cyberbullying, and I've heard kids say about other kids, like, they're a completely different person online. Like, they're fine at school, but then they're so mean online, and I don't trust them because they're friends with this other person who's so mean to everyone. But so much of it happens outside of the school. There's nothing the school can do. And then it happens online, and the school will say to the parents, take the phone away. But you can't always do that. And whether they're able to or not, that's not fixing the problem.
Right. And then it's making the kid want to stay isolated and not go to school. Like, I mean, the high school I went to, I saw something probably like years ago, but if you were sleeping, like if you had your head on the desk or whatever, like someone would take a picture and post it on the Instagram page that they had. And it's like, so now these kids are like scared to do anything because,
you're
hey,
free
like,
to exist.
yeah, like, am I going to have something taken of me if like I do this? So I just got to go to school, sit there and suck it up and deal with it.
That's happening in the professional workplace too.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa, wait, what? Like, what are you, like, what was said, or like, what was created? And like, it's happening in our professional workplaces. There's almost this like immunity that's felt because it's not that like immediate interaction. And also then like, I think about, there's that disconnect from the vulnerability of the ability to even like sit in this podcast today. And like, I'm speaking like from my heart, and I'm speaking from my brain related to research and stuff. And I only have what I have, right? Like, I've only, I'm sure there's a million articles out there that talk about the benefits of social media and how, like, and and I've read, you know, I've done my
We're all
balanced
sponsored
research.
by Meta.
I've done my balanced research, and I'm a clinician, I'm a trainer, and I'm a parent. And my goal in being in a space like this and being vulnerable in a space like this is just to provide you with the education and the knowledge so you can decide for yourself what you're going to do with what is being talked about today. And if you don't like it, that's fine. You can even say, hey, I don't agree with you. Awesome. Don't be like, I don't agree with you and your shirt sucks. Like that, that I don't agree with. Yeah.
And in those instances, like, I have seen people take like screenshots of people on Zoom or screenshots of people, or like snap a picture of somebody in the workplace and then send it out to a group text. I've heard of supervisors trying to run a group supervision and having the people in the group supervision, like texting each other, burning that supervise, like, are we adults here? Shut the fuck up. Like, that's not, like, man, that one got me real heated.
Or consent.
Or consent.
There was that a while ago. There was something. It was I think a famous actress took a picture of someone in a locker
In a locker room. I remember that.
Fuck.
And that woman should have been charged with a sex crime.
Yeah.
But that's happening to kids, where teenagers are taking pictures of each other in the locker room, texting it to each other, like, so one, to be the victim of that, but then also now you've got a dissemination of like the creation and dissemination of child pornography charge, which carries with it up to 5 years in federal prison, children. And so, like, that's why kids shouldn't have smartphones. Like, my kid's gonna get a banana phone. Like, that's it. You can't take pictures with it. You can't. But
Conversations about consent. You cannot like take pictures of other people's bodies.
I remember that story though, and I was livid, and I felt like they should have made an example out of that actress. But one, she was being cruel to that woman. Like, she did it to make fun of this strange woman who was going to the gym, like. So I remember that particular story, but I also remember she had no consequences other than public ridicule. And, like, to me, that's a sex crime. And she should have at least had a slap on the wrist so that we could publish that part of the story too.
Right.
But she probably had really good lawyers. But 14-year-old Kelly at this such and such school does it. She doesn't have access to those same lawyers and research, and she's now getting herself in a fair amount of trouble that's going to follow her for the rest of her life.
And I think because they're so removed from real life and everything is behind a screen, it feels like nothing can touch you. So you don't realize that there can still be real life consequences. And I think a lot of students that I'm around, like, day to day, also don't feel like there are any consequences. Like, I point blank ask them, and they don't think that anything can happen based on their actions on social media because, oh, it's outside of school, so the school can't do anything. Like, well, some things are bigger than school. Like, you're hurting people, and I think there's such a removal from that.
Yeah.
They don't come into contact.
Yeah. And then
Any of the
and kids, they'll bully on social media. They won't bully in real life. Not that there's not bullying in real life, because there absolutely is, but I
It's
think it
easier
just
to
makes
do
it worse. And there's more cyber bullies than real life bullies, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how can we, like, as mental health professionals, how can we, my next podcast, the next topic that's coming up, I'm pretty excited about it, is all about advocacy. And so how can we use our role to advocate for some of the really necessary change we need to see in our field and in some of our policies? But what can we do with this as parents, as individuals with a certain level of influence? I mean, you're in a school setting. I think you go in and out of RTFs. We both work in mental health, in a mental health clinic. Like, what can we do within our individual roles to create change in a context where you're really up against it? Like, how do I, in an hour of therapy a week, offset what 24/7 access to cyberbullying or some of these other pieces? How do we do it?
So with me, like, I work with families and, like, the children up in the placements. And so I think, like, working with both sides and, like, yes, having empathy with, like, yes, all kids have social media. Like, most parents are always on their phones and stuff. But, like, just making more awareness. Like, I mean, today I actually just did a safety plan for a kid's phone because that's how he would interact with the peers that he shouldn't hang out with. So it was like, let's give you that sense of awareness so you know, but let's, like, keep building off of that so that it makes you better, or that you learn, and then maybe your other peers will follow.
Yeah.
So
Kim, I think you had mentioned this before too, like backfilling in the more positive activities that will draw them outside of their phone, outside of their house, and into more natural social interactions. And yes, like, resources are limited, and there's a lot of challenges with that. And, like, involvement in some kind of activity, some kind of community-based activity, finding a safe place to allow your child to start discovering the world independently. And I mean, I have 3 kids, and they all started their own individual journeys at different times because they're individuals, and I trust in different ways based off of who they are. And so I think as parents, knowing like balancing and knowing the information and balancing like the pros and cons of unsupervised interactions, versus being in the home and just being on. For boys, it's actually more related to like social interactions regarding like video games and like YouTube shorts, like stuff like that, rather than that conversational social media interactions. But I really think just backfilling in some of the things like, hey, play a game with your kids, go outside with your kids, encourage those interactions. Find there's like a lot of untapped resources as I'm going through different counties. Part of my role is to travel around all the different counties. And I just love the energy that's created when it's like, we found this awesome benefit that, like in one of the counties I was just at this morning, there's a summer program that's $50 a week for your kid to be there full time. And there's grant programs. There's a lot of untapped funds that are kind of sitting out there. So I think as a clinician, somebody who travels around, somebody who supervises and provides support, using like the internet, right? Using the internet, using your coworkers, using other parents, using the school to see how you can access some of those resources, to offset some of the costs for some of these programs as well.
Yeah. I think even knowing like what your client or like family is interested in, like maybe doing your own research and being like, hey, like this is close to you. Why don't you guys like try that and, go out and explore? Because then it kind of gives them not only the sense that like you care and you're like taking an interest, but at the same time, like it's getting them to kind of break the electronics and like not be on the games or whatever and actually go do something as a family.
That's a lot of what I'm looking into for my kids over the summer, because they're not, at the very least, when they come to school, they're having an in-person social interaction. It's often interrupted by technology, but they're having it. But during the summer, there's nothing stopping them a lot of the time from sitting at home and being on their phone or being on Fortnite the whole summer.
Yeah.
And so what I'm also looking into is like, sometimes the library will do groups for kids who love Roblox. So like they're connecting over that shared like video game interest, but they're still showing up in person to interact with other people in real life, because I feel like that's the biggest thing that it's getting. Like we talked about, what is it getting in the way of? And I think that's what we're getting at this entire time, is that being on a screen is keeping us away from everything else.
I think it's also really important for us to attend to how we feel afterwards, about a whole host of different things. Like I love a good like eye roll and scroll for a minute, and usually afterwards I don't feel literally any better than when I did it. So like yes, in that moment I'm getting those short dopamine hits. But then when I put it away, really what I notice is that it's harder for me to be engaged and present in like disconnected from those pieces. And I think, again, that falls into those American Academy of Pediatrics recommendations, like encouraging children and adolescents to pay attention to how that resource makes them feel big picture, almost like zoom out of the experiencer and move into that role of the observing self and attend to what is the impact of that behavior big picture. And I see that pretty free, like with my own kids, like neither of my kids on social media, they're way too young, but they love their Nintendo Switches. And we don't do screens Monday through Friday, because in my house it just what we noticed is that it was doing a lot more harm than good, big picture. Yes, we might have those like 20 minutes where mom and dad can get done what they need to get done, but then when we turn it off, like the whole world ends. And what I'm really trying to help my children notice, instead of not allowing them to use their switches, but on the weekends when we let them play with the switch and then they turn it off and they melt the fuck down. Like they just lose their like, especially my 6-year-old, man, he just will like be sobbing and he's like, I just like, and it's like, buddy, friend, let's look at it. Let's look at right now, you played Minecraft for an hour and now everything sucks. And like pay attention to that because like notice that. And so instead of us, because at the end of the day, someday he's going to have to make his own choices surrounding all of this. And if nothing else, I want to teach him and help him integrate like some of that self-regulate, like that self-monitoring, that self-regulation, that like, it's not that any of this stuff is inherently bad, but my kids act different if they watch Mark Rober versus Mr. Beast. Like we could both 15-minute YouTube clips. They watch Mark Rober, they're like, let's build a rocket. They watch Mr. Beast and they're like, I want to drive a Lamborghini. And like those are like, bruh, you're never going to drive a Lamborghini. And you'll probably never build a rocket ship either, but I'm here for that one. Like, it's just that balance. Like, look at the outcome afterwards, not just how you feel in the moment. I think if more of us did that, I don't know, I think we'd lean into the things that serve us probably.
You bring up dopamine hits, and I was going to say something similar. I try to use a lot of psychoeducation with clients sometimes around this. Like, especially similar to addiction research, that not only, you're getting that quick hit, but then that's also desensitizing you to like enjoying I shouldn't say normal, but like other forms of joy, like watching a sunset with your partner. Like, that doesn't do it anymore because it's not as quick. It's not as easy. So for some of my clients with depression, like, yes, that's making you feel good right now, but like you're also wondering why other things aren't fulfilling anymore, and that could be impacting that.
Yeah. They actually say, like involvement on social media is the same as the dopamine hits you get when you play slot machines, and so you can take it and say like, okay, so your money is your time, right? And so would you continue to put money into a slot machine? Other things aside, would you continue to put money into a slot machine that you're not winning on? No, you get up and do something different, right? And so if you think of social media as the same way, right? If you go in with a budget, then that's it. That's all you got. And so you got like a 5-minute budget versus an endless budget. I just, opened up a open line of credit. Let's do this. And if you go in with like, I have an open amount of time to just sit here in this space and continue to get those dopamine hits, eventually you're going to find yourself in a pattern where like you can't stop. In a book I think you and I both have been listening and reading a book, and it's called The Anxious Generation. And in that book, it talks about how we continue to like seek that like immediate gratification, and it moves us away from like, usually when you're playing a slot machine, you're not really playing with anybody else. But if you go in with a budget and a goal to continue to move into a different direction, afterwards, there's more of like a motivation. But now I remember what I was going to say. The author, you probably know where I was going with, like his daughter was like, she was actually sitting there with her tablet and she was like, Dad, take this away from me. I cannot stop myself.
Have you watched any of those videos? Like about like kids who have had their devices removed? Like I watched a heartbreaking video the other day, and I almost thought about like playing it for y'all and bringing it in here, but it's like, it's a real little boy, and it's not mine to share, I guess, but he's like pretending to scroll and just like weep. He's like in the fetal position on his side, like scream crying, like just like doing this motion over and over and over again. And it's like, holy cats, like,
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's that individualized piece, right? Because you're like right here, like many of these negative effects, the research actually shows can be ameliorated by co-viewing or co-playing, like doing it together, watching the clip with your child
Right.
versus here you go, kids.
Like, good luck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I need to do laundry like the next person. So like there are times where it's like, here's your switch.
Yeah.
But the co-viewing, the co-playing, the engaging with them
Yeah.
reduces a lot of these harmful effects.
I feel like something that's scary about it is it almost becomes the default as opposed to the default of like a situation just being, oh, I'm sitting here and I'm bored now while I'm waiting. It's no, I'm doing something else now while I'm waiting, to the point that, and I've noticed it in myself, like if I have a moment of idleness, I will start looking at something on my phone. And sometimes I'm like, did I open Facebook? I didn't open it on purpose. I didn't open Instagram on purpose. But it's been 20 minutes and I'm scrolling. And how did this happen? And I feel like, and I at least have the awareness that this is something that I do. So I'm trying to be more aware of it and make it not my first instinct. But I can't imagine how much worse it would be if I didn't even notice, because for a long time I didn't.
No, one of my favorite authors is this guy, Cal Newport. He also has a podcast, and he's written a bunch of really good books. But one of his more recent ones is called Digital Minimalism. And one of the things he really talks about and addresses in that is the opportunity cost of never being bored. And so I know specifically my 8-year-old is like big on this. He's like, I'm bored, Mom. I'm like, good. And then he's like, so? I'm like, get on board. I don't know, buddy. And like, those are the moments where he does like the coolest shit. But like, it's always like, well, I'm bored. So, like, essentially, what are you going to do about it that I'm bored? And it's like, I pay for the mortgage on this home. That's what I'm going to do about it. Find your own fun, buddy. And usually I'll like to give him like an ultimatum, like, well, mommy's gonna go do some chicken chores. You want to come outside with me and do it? No. All right, then find a way to get on board. I'm not going to be bored because I'm doing these things. Figure it out. But there's always that expectation, like being bored is the worst possible thing that could happen. And like, that's where the magic is. Like the boredom comes, just like that's where the magic is when you're slightly uncomfortable. Like that's data. That's a good message to you saying like, you should change something. You should alter your behavior in some kind of way because you will feel less of this. But instead we're like, well, maybe Facebook has the answer. And like, it doesn't have the answer. It never did. It never will. But that's where we find ourselves. And it's dangerous.
Yeah.
So I think our time is just about coming to an end. And as we were talking here today, I realized I forgot what our last call was today. Does anyone remember? No. Neither do I. So I'm going to make it up on the fly. And I would like our last call. And then this one's for me, right? My last call is I would like us to move away from the do as I say, not as I do in terms of our kids and adolescents. I feel like every conversation surrounding social media inevitably crawls down across the generations, and we're like, well, it's the way it's hurting the children. And that's cool. And I think it's important. I think, yeah, they have developing brains. Their prefrontal cortexes are still sorting itself out. And I'm sure there's negative impacts there. And I think so often we as caregivers and parents and the adults in charge are failing to pay attention to that part. We make it about the younger generation, and we're not zooming out and looking at ourselves. And one of the best points of data is that children and adolescents who have a caregiver that sets a good example in terms of media consumption are going to have healthier relationships with media. And yet, so often we're like, get them off the Minecraft. So that's my last call for here today. I think that we as caregivers and parents and the adults within the room need to start taking that searching and fearless internal inventory rather than pointing a finger or pointing the blame to the younger generation. Any other closing thoughts or anything left unsaid in that particular area?
Not for me, no.
No, not really.
Well, then thank you all for joining me here today. This will
Thank
be on
you.
social media.
So join us on social media.
Watch our reel. We've got a lot of great upcoming topics here today. So our next pod will be in the studio in just a couple weeks, filming about advocacy and how we become agents for change within our communities. Really excited about that particular one. We have Jennifer Storm, an author and public speaker, that will be joining for that particular pod. So that will be extremely cool, along with a number of other brilliant guests. But, Jennifer's a big name. Then we also have one coming up on mindfulness and the lack of mindfulness, really, and sort of how that impacts us. And then, as usual, we're always accepting questions. So shoot me an email at kim@howtobehappyhour.com. And otherwise, thanks for listening.